for joining us on the original tracks. We'll see you next week for more of the newest original music from amazing upcoming independent artists from around the world. Stay tuned for American Psycho coming up next. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the greatest show on the air. Prepare yourself as we journey into the mind of madness and intrigue. Fasten your seatbelts and prepare for liftoff. It's time for American Psycho. Here's your host, Mr. Brian Crow.
Yeah, I guess that's me. Last time I checked my ID, that was in fact the name that was there. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning back into another episode of American Psycho. It is so great to be back here with you. In fact, sometimes it's just great to be anywhere. I am your host. Oh, yeah, the ID says Brian Crow, and that's what the intro says, too. Hey, man, how's everybody doing? Cool, glad to hear it. We are in... Yeah, I'm really getting tired of hearing that song for a variety of reasons. Oh, wait, we're redecorating the room. Those of you who are streaming right now, it's pointed right at me, so... Wow, there's... God, you know, you show up here and there's new stuff every single week. Next thing you know, strippers. That was a request. Anyway. Over there taking down the Geek Speak. That's right, because the guys from Geek Speak were in here just a little bit ago doing what they do. And, yeah, so, hey, we have a really exciting and fun show coming up this week. I got a gentleman calling in just a little bit. A very interesting and eclectic producer, a guy by the name of Kevin Army. And we will get into some of the fun and details based around that as soon as he calls in. In the meantime, I'm going to sit here and verbally tread water, which there's a visual that goes with that, with like you're up to your eyeballs in water, but you're using your tongue and somehow staying afloat. That's exactly what I'm doing right now. So I hope wherever you are and whoever you are and whatever corner of the world that you're in, although I don't know how the world has any corners because it's a giant circle, but let's go with that analogy anyway. I hope that you guys are having a great, towards the end of 2013, and you are experiencing some joyous times as we head into these holiday seasons. Whatever holiday it is that you celebrate, whatever way you celebrate it, just assuming that there's very little child sacrifice, because that gets weird. Anyhow, what else is going on in the world? You know, I got to tell you, it's been an interesting last couple months for me. I'll just share something with you. I know that in the past I've talked about the band that I've been in called 01, and as of late, we'll just make the announcement official. I am no longer the guitar player in that band. They have decided to move on to different circles with one less guitar player. And I will reserve passing judgment on that because, you know, I don't have to and I'm just a tad bit biased. But in the meantime, we'll still listen to that in the background. That might go away. Not out of any sort of malice or anything at all. I'm sorry, did somebody say something there in the background? Yeah. Anyhow, so you over there, yes, you, in the background on the camera, on one of the cameras, yes. So, what are you doing? Nothing? That's some of the most active nothing I've ever seen. You sound like me with my mom when I was 14, not doing anything. Nothing, not doing anything.
It's the Hollywood Rock and Wrap Up with your host, Jason Hadley. A sequel has been announced to the
Shh. Yeah, definitely don't incriminate yourself because we want to be able to do that for you.
Or inseminate myself.
I don't even want to see the moment when you inseminate yourself. That would be weird and awkward.
Or contaminate myself.
I don't even know what that means. Is that a real word?
No.
They're great. So, God, he's speaking more gibberish than I am. So, and by the way, as well as doing this show, in the last couple of months, I have become the host of a music show called Sunset Island Music Radio, which is all about independent music. So, hey, if you're out there and you've been tuning into this show and you are a band or an artist, singer, songwriter, what have you, and you want to be able to get your music heard across the planet, go to sunsetislandmusicradio.com and tune in. And hey, I got a phone call coming in. Hello?
Hello, I'm calling for Brian Crow. This is Kevin Army.
Well, it's funny, Kevin, you've got Brian Crow on the phone. Thank you so much for calling in, man. It's great to hear you.
Wow. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you? So, for the listening audience that is out there, calling in is an engineer-producer by the name of Kevin Army, and Kevin has been around for a number of years. Certainly very influential in the early punk rock movement. In fact, so Kevin, let's talk about that. When did you really start getting into the rock and roll industry?
Well, I had a punk rock band in '77. Actually, before we even heard any punk rock, we just threw it together.
Right.
And, I spent a few years floundering in punk rock bands, and early 80s, somewhere in the early 80s, I started producing people and helping out. And, I just worked for free and did whatever I could and got some experience, and then I started producing.
So
it was just fun.
Well, so was that the thing that sort of got you into it? Got you into it in the first place? Was there was just an element of this is a really fucking good time?
Yeah, I think so. And I loved punk rock, and in the late '70s, early '80s, like most recording studios and recording engineers hated punk rock, and so. Friends would want me to go in and help, like, make it a little better, I think, Have someone who cared around, even though I had no idea what I was doing.
Well, isn't that the way that most of the best art actually comes about, is just out of complete gut instinct?
Sometimes. There's some bad art that I helped create on the way, but, then some stuff. Sometimes I look at some of the earlier things I did before I really knew how to engineer, and I'm kind of like, yeah, that was pretty good. So, yeah, there's something to be said for both schools.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you played also, correct?
Yeah, I had bands. Nothing ever went anywhere.
Yeah, but I bet you have stories.
Oh yeah.
Because I don't think anybody, there's not a lot of people out there that actually have any sense of what the early days of punk were really like. Even people now that are going, oh yeah, I love the Ramones, and I love the Clash, and I love Green Day. I mean, they don't know about what the early days of punk were really, really like. But something tells me you've got a little bit of insight into that. What were those early days like?
It kind of had a long path, right? Because, you're naming three bands there that are like, the Clash and Green Day are something like 10 years apart.
Right.
And I can only speak to the scene in California in the early days. In '77, it was pretty small. Played at some strange clubs, which could be really cool.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorites was the Deaf Club, which was actually a club for deaf people, and they loved the punk bands because they were so loud they could feel the vibrations and they danced to the music.
That's awesome.
And, that is one of the things that would best represent that era. But it was also a kind of, that early version was a lot of art school people, a lot of drug addicts, and that's just the San Francisco version. It could have been different in other places. And it's weird. It's like those early bands like the Clash or the Ramones, who are icons now, they weren't really that successful. They were kind of hated by the mainstream audience back then.
Which I think was to me, that's one of the things that became so interesting about punk, is that, as I was, back then I was a kid and I became a fan of that stuff towards the late 70s, early 80s. And yeah, when I told people I loved the Ramones, or I liked the Clash, or was into the Dead Boys, or the Pistols, or, Flipper, or Black Flag, or any of that stuff, it was sort of like I said, yeah, I have the plague.
Yeah, especially because you were out in Contra Costa at that time, weren't you?
No, I was in Marin, where it was really weird.
Well, Oh, yeah, same thing, yeah. Yeah, it was particularly weird in the Bay Area. Like, I've talked to people in other areas, like in Boston, there was a mainstream station that played, like, that kind of stuff on it, so it wasn't as outcast in some towns, but especially around here, it really was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happened is that eventually, I mean, it didn't happen. Punk didn't take off commercially, and there's a period in the mid-'80s where it's just, like, super underground.
Right.
And just kind of, and even, like, there's a period where it turned real hardcore and kind of was losing its melody, and I don't know, it just kind of started fading in some ways, but this strong underground remained.
Sure.
With people like Maximum Rock and Roll and stuff. And, you know, sometime around 86, 87, that changed, and you got the second generation of punk rockers.
Mm-hmm.
Which is when it, you know, you got the bands that succeeded. But even that took a while, and it was a long grassroots effort. But it was always fun.
So,
I think.
you think? Well, I know you were there. I would hope that you would know. So once you got into it, I mean, and you began really sort of tinkering and being one of the guys behind the scenes who was engineering records and producing records. Was there something specific that you looked for in a band to work with, or it was like, who walked through the door and let's go?
I was kind of lucky just because, I mean, the stuff I'd done for free, I'd done a few records, and it, you know, said that I like working with punk rock. So, I mean, I tended to attract the kind of bands I liked.
Uh-huh.
So it wasn't, I didn't really have to think about it much. There's like a year where I learned how to engineer where there's some strange situations.
Mm-hmm.
Some strange music that I did. But then pretty quickly, I started recording that second generation of punk bands.
Right.
And just kind of lucked into working with a bunch of stuff I liked.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really even have to make that decision a whole lot because just all these great bands started appearing in the Bay Area. The whole Gilman Street scene happened.
Right.
And, you know, I was just lucky. I just got to work with a bunch of great bands.
And who were some of those bands? I mean, who do you remember from those days?
Well, I mean, the band that kind of started that sound that appeared was the Mr. T Experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's 86. And, you know, that was like, they came in and we did this record super fast. I was like, oh, God, we can't do a record this fast. Oh, we can't do it. And then we did, and I was like, hey, that's actually an okay record. And that's how I learned about you could record a record in 13 hours, a whole full length. And
wait a minute, I'm sorry. You just spun my head on its axis. You said do a record in 13 hours?
Yeah, something like that. It was split into a couple of sessions, but you know, here's the thing. If you do it that fast, I was just learning to engineer still, and I didn't have time to mess it up. So it came out okay, and really, you know, that's how Chuck Berry did records.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're all programmed by that point, especially, that you've got to spend forever doing a record. But, you know, it blew my mind at the time, too. But when I got the finished product, I went, oh, it's a pretty good record.
So let's talk about that for a quick second, because I've always been a little bit hazy on this, but for people that are listening, what is the difference between a producer and an engineer?
The simple way of looking at it is the engineer's like the photographer, the producer's like the director of the movie.
Gotcha.
And that can take a variety of roles. It can be, you know, you can produce very offhand, just let them do their thing, and once in a while say something. And then there can be those guys that like write pop music where they write the song and they make the backing track and they plug some poor singer in as their, you know, that like the Milli Vanilli school or something, you know. So
Milli Vanilli had a school?
It's hard to define sometimes because it has such a range of activity.
Sure, but at least the idea, I guess, in being an engineer, part of what you're your job and your function was to really capture what it was that the band or the artist was doing. Not necessarily directing them in one way or the other, but being the person who goes, you know what, my job is whatever it is that they're doing in that studio is to capture it to the best ability, at least of the gear in the room that you've got. Would that be safe?
Yeah, I mean, for me, even both as a producer and engineer, it's to try and just capture the essence of the band as best as you can.
Uh-huh.
And really, you know, the equipment can be terrible and it can be great, and it doesn't matter almost as much as getting that magical thing to just come across.
Right.
You know, I mean, a band comes in. I learned pretty quickly, like in 5 minutes, you just have to make really good friends with a band right away. They have to feel relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't achieve that, they're going to be uncomfortable, and then you're going to make one of those records you hear where the band sounds uncomfortable, and everyone goes, they're so much better live.
Right.
And you don't want that. You want people to hear it and go, wow, that's great. I want to go see them live, and they go see them live, and they go, I want to hear the record, and that, you know, they're both just as good, hopefully.
Sure. So was there any particular approach, or, I mean, was there anything conscious that you did? So when a band came in and these were complete strangers, never heard their music, whatever, and you knew, okay, I'm going to go work, was there a way that you approached that said, all right, how do I make that that bond so that they feel good about what they're about to do?
Yeah, just be friendly. You know, learn their names right away.
Mm-hmm.
Hit your channel on with silence, but the ad came on with noise.
Yeah.
Okay, you're closed. You're closed out. I'm not seeing you out of time now. And I would try and meet with a band ahead of time once things started going, so that it wasn't always them just walking in without ever having met me. Because you know, it's good to establish some kind of connection, I think. Because when I was in bands and you go into studios and you get these guys who'd be just like bored to death.
Right.
As engineers, they'd be staring at you the whole time, and you'd just be like, I want to get out of here. So I think
We're actually getting a call in. Hang on one second, Kevin. Hi, you've reached American Psycho. Who's calling in?
Well, this is Johannes Lysicki from the great city of Linden, Washington. How are you?
I'm great. And what has...
You are great, huh?
Yeah, so what has prompted your call in this evening?
Well, what prompted me to call in is just to see how you guys are doing, because Troy told me to call in.
Well, thanks, Troy. We're doing great. You're actually on the phone with...
Where is Troy? Is Troy there somewhere?
He's Troy. He's here somewhere. He's just not in the studio or on the radio or doing this show.
Well, we don't want him to do the show, do we? Anyway, I guess he didn't tell you who I was, did he?
No, in fact, because I'm currently... we've also got engineer and producer Kevin Army on the show right now.
Uh-huh. Well, that's very good. Anyway, we are probably going to be working on one of the new great shows that you're going to put up down on Excite Radio, called, what are we going to call it? How to... no, I can't even remember the show. Isn't that something?
Well, it's off to a great start.
That's right. See, that's the way it goes. Anyway, In Pursuit. A show called In Pursuit of a Dream. You probably haven't. You better talk to Austin, to Troy about that, and tell him what this is all about.
That sounds like a great post-show idea.
So anyhow, what we started out with is several weeks ago about the Heart Challenge swim of swimming 1,000 miles at age 73. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, actually, I'm familiar with Diana Nyad, who swam from Cuba to Florida. But and meaning absolutely no disrespect, I'm actually right in the midst of an interview that has less to do with swimming.
Well, that's very good then. You better go ahead and then complete that interview, and then we'll talk again.
That sounds great. And by all means, call back in at another point, and absolutely look forward to hearing what you're going to be bringing to the station, because it sounds like a great thing.
Fantastic. Take care.
You too, my brother.
Yeah, bye-bye.
And hello, hard left turn. So that was a complete out of left field, and this is the kind of month I've been having. So here's what I'm going to do, because I'm going to do my best. It looks like we actually lost the connection with Kevin Army. Got to try to reconnect that. But in the meantime, he had mentioned a band that he had worked with by the name of Mr. T Experience. So I'm actually going to put on a track that Kevin worked with that band on. We're going to check them out and be back in just a little bit and see where it all goes from there. Because, you know, nothing says excitement like, what the fuck is going on next? So this is the Mr. T Experience with Look Out! Engineered by Mr. Kevin Army. So check this.
I can go, but I can't see you're a lot like me. So maybe you know somewhere people like us can't go, but we won't get kicked out, cause we've got lots to talk about. After years of research, I think I've figured it out. That's the little thing that gets you down. It's the bigger things that you can't get around. And it's way too far on the middle ground, but everything else is wide open. So let's go. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Together. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Teacher, please. Don't be such a tease. Give me some kind of sign, not detention this time. The things that we used to do have been turned into a zoo. But people who say all the things that we used to say, and if we say them again, we're gonna sound just like them. After years of remorse, I think I've taken it in. It's the little things that gets you down. It's the bigger things that you can't get around. And it's way too far on the middle ground, but everything else is our oyster. Everything else is a picnic. Everything else is terrific. So let's go. Ba 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 ba. 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 Together. Ba 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 ba. Yeah. Ba 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 ba.
Seeking a home for your website and require managed services? What are managed services? You need to make a change to your website but don't know how to do it? Don't have a content management system installed or don't understand how to use it? Managed hosting is the way to go. With XMLA Managed Website Hosting, you just email us or give us a call and we will update your website for you. Packages start at only $24.95 per month, and it's only $5 for each additional gigabyte of space, and you can host and serve your site on a fast, reliable platform with complete control. Visit xmlahost.com for complete information.
Kick sit back with your favorite cigar
Hello?
or yourself your favorite beverage and enjoy some Drinks at Sunset with the Wise Guys. hosted
Hello?
by Paul
You there?
and Vinny, with
I am here.
things which you're not
Hey, what happened?
Somebody called in and everything got completely disconnected and weird because that's the joy with technology. I've currently got a commercial break. I actually just played a tune by the Mr. T Experience, and so I've got commercials going, and then we'll come back in and make fun of it.
Sounds good.
Sorry about that. That was
No, it's fine.
that's been the way this week is going. Hang on one quick second. Don't move.
Okay.
Dub, grab your lunchbox and prepare to enjoy some Gorilla Cookie Radio Show. Live every Thursday at 7 with your host, Silverback, and his co-host in disguise, Tool Ranchula. As they
All right, we're good.
brain with chocolate-filled
Yeah?
every Thursday at 7.
1 sec. All right, we got.
Do you know about Ty Curtis? Ty Curtis's musical journey continues to explore new territory, but the heartfelt lyrics, emotion-wrought vocals, and searing guitar licks are still there. At 25, Ty has already released 4 critically acclaimed CDs that feature his ever-growing catalog of original songs. Ty's compositions range from soulful ballads to roadhouse rockers to reggae and blues, and live performances cover the same wide range of material with drive and fire that fill the dance floors. For more information, visit tycurtis.net.
And everybody, welcome back to that was something out of that was the Twilight Zone portion of this week's version of American Psycho. We are back on the phone with Kevin Army, the very patient Kevin Army. Kevin, you there?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, where were we? Oh, we were talking about something important, and then somebody else decided to come in and go, "Look, cows."
Cow? Where?
Exactly. So, so in terms of music, so I know. I mean, after having, well, let's talk about. So, where was the point that you had the opportunity to expand and work with Green Day? Because that's, I mean, as much as they've grown from the time that you worked with them, even when you worked on Nimrod, that was kind of awesome, yeah.
I didn't do Nimrod. Did the album before that, Insomnia.
Oh, well, see, if I had gotten some sleep, I would have known that.
That's okay.
So when you worked on Insomnia.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing that, you know, I'd worked with Trey and Billy and band before that.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'd help them finish their demo that got them the deal on Warner's, and then they did Dookie.
Right.
And they wanted Insomniac to be edgier, so they thought of me. And so that's how I ended up engineering that album and working with them at that point in time, which was fun. So, I mean, I recorded Trey when he was 12 in The Lookouts, which would be the first thing put out on Lookout Records, which ended up being the label all those bands from Gilman ended up being on.
Really? So wait a minute. So he was 12 and you were working on a record with him? 12?
It was pretty awesome. Yeah, it was after the Mr. T Experience album came out, and the guy in The Lookouts wrote me and said, "Would you work with us?" I said, "Sure." And, you know, they come in the studio, and it's a 12-year-old drummer. And, you know, he's trying to play double bass drum and stuff, and kind of by the end of the song, I'm noticing there's no bass drum anymore. And, you know, but I mean, it was 12. It was awesome at 12.
Exactly.
And,
I mean,
know,
it's like, how do you not just acknowledge how great that is?
Yeah. And you know, it was fascinating between that and then Insomniac's like 10 years later,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and like a monster drummer, just like, you know, unbelievable. So
Right.
So it's kind of fun to watch people grow and, you know, come into their own as artists and stuff.
So let's geek out for a moment about recording habits, and then I'm going to actually tap into a little bit of Castle Black history because, yeah. But so in terms of for the guitar players out there, because being one frequently, historically, you've done a pretty great job in terms of engineering such in capturing some pretty massive and amazing guitar sounds. Is there like a secret to that you've got, or are you just sort of like, I do this?
There's certain tricks to getting good guitar sounds, and they're not always what you think. I mean, the general advice I have is amplifiers are made to be really loud.
Yes.
So, I mean, you want to crank them up, and then the general mistake a lot of people make is they want to distort it too much.
Right.
So, like, if you walk up to someone who's playing a Marshall, and, you see the master's up a fair amount, but then the preamp's up all the way, it's too buzzy. It takes up too much space.
Uh-huh.
And if you think of all those listen to some of the classic rock records where you always go, wow, that was a great guitar, like an AC/DC record or something.
Uh-huh.
It's really not that overdriven. But it rocks. So, I mean, that's part of it sometimes. And, playing the right part, having a good guitar player, having everyone arrange things good, and there's other stuff too, obviously. I'm an advocate of as much tube gear as you can when you're recording the guitar.
Sure.
But then again, sometimes it doesn't have to be. A lot of that early stuff I did, I had no tube gear anywhere near me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also rooms, the space the guitar is in can make a big difference. I tend to like a deader space, because if you get too much reflection, you start getting too many overtones, and it gets kind of...
Right. You can add the ambience to it later. But to go back to what you were initially talking about, I'm a firm believer in exactly where. In fact, I think that guitar amps always sound the best right before they explode.
They sound good when they're exploding too.
Yeah, no, that has a whole other different element. I remember, back in the 80s when it was all about having, the massive refrigerator rack, and you had your preamp and your rack effects and your power amp. I remember having this one power amp, and it was, 5 bazillion tubes and 2 bazillion watts. And it got to a point where right before a bunch of the tubes failed, I remember thinking, God, this thing sounds really, really fucking good. And then I realized it's because the power section was just like, oh, God, please, can I get through another song? And it was so great. And then when poof, died, I went, oh, that's why. Which is so completely the antithesis of home audio gear, where you want it to be functioning perfectly at all times at optimum frequency ranges, etc., etc. Such a complete different approach, but yeah, totally get that.
Yeah, the sad thing is then if you've got really great sound and everything blows up, and you only get halfway through the session.
Yeah,
you're in trouble then.
Yeah,
but,
no, there is that. No, that's the one thing. It's like it sounds so great it breaks. You go, yeah, well, in another couple of years it'll sound that good again. Or does anybody have a used tube I can borrow or something?
But all those tube amps are made to, they're not made to be played quiet. The Marshalls they're very, that's why sometimes recording with a 50 watt is better.
Exactly.
Because you can just crank it, but, and then of course if you buy amp or tramp with a bunch of them, then it's thunderous.
Totally. No,
but it's just happier.
I remember, I remember, in fact, before you and I had ever met, I remember doing sessions with some of my older bands, and I'd be working in these studios, and I would be the guy going, no, I want to turn this up. I want to make this loud. It sounds better when it's loud. And be like, it doesn't have to be loud. And this, I'm like, no, the amp sounds better that way. And just bucking that sort of whole concept. It was like, no, this is why guitar amps and guitars sound great. I'm sorry, Jimmy Page didn't record at volume 2. Jimi Hendrix didn't record at a low volume. That shit sounds great because they were beating the crap out of their gear. And no, we just it doesn't have, you don't have to do that anymore. Shut up. It's crazy. Absolute insanity.
Oh, yeah. I would go visit studios. They'd try and get me to come over and check them out. I remember this one guy, and the studio's in the bottom of his house, and there's windows. He's in the basement, but there's windows out to the backyard. And he said, I really can't record here because I triamp a lot of times. And your neighbors are going to complain. He goes, oh, you don't need to do that, man. You don't need to turn the guitars up. I'm like, man, we are really not going to work well together. Goodbye.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm. And you didn't understand. He was more of an alternative band kind of guy.
Right.
And I guess.
You just need a combo and a distortion pedal and a lot of angst.
Yeah, I mean, you and me are both, even though metal and punk are pretty different worlds, the guitar thing is pretty similar.
Totally.
You know, I mean, you just got to get that rhythm sound, and if you don't, then the record's not going to be as awesome as it could be.
To me, that was one of the whole things where I never personally felt that punk and metal were really all that far apart. There was a little bit of a different emotional aspect behind it, but in terms of just like a gut level, fuck off and I'm in your face, it was like both of those schools of music were right there neck and neck. Just one of them took a guitar solo and the other one took drugs.
They're different, but you know, like if you were going to produce a metal or a punk band, you'd pretty much do the same thing.
Exactly.
Because of the similarities, which is like, you know, it's about energy. I mean, either band, if they're not just like super energetic and like hitting you in the face with what they're doing, it kind of falls flat.
Totally. No, I mean,
and the singing is really different. The guitar playing is different when there's a solo. But, I mean, there's general things that have always worked with rock and roll and are always going to work. And, you know, that's...
I mean, I remember having...
what rock and roll is about.
Totally. I mean, I remember having friends that were confused that I was a huge fan of Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and a huge fan of the Ramones. And they would go, well, there's like not the same thing. I'm like, yeah, it is. It's like, it's generally the same kind of thing. It's big, brash, punchy, in your face, no holds barred, and get out of my way if you don't like it. I never understood where the conflict was in that. But that's just me.
Yeah. Well, you know, everyone sees things differently. And they're culturally different, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And some people can't handle... they have to hang on to their cultural view. I mean, and I'm guilty of this. I didn't like those metal bands particularly, even though in hindsight, there's bands I would probably like now. I'm not so
I'm guilty of that.
Things.
I got to tell you, I will announce this. I've admitted this quietly to people elsewhere, including my son. I mean, way back, in the 80s, boy, I got to tell you how many times I said horrible, horrible, horrible things about the Police. And I was so wrong. I was being such an arrogant, it's not metal asshole.
Sometimes. It's hard not to pick on them, but they were a great band.
Yeah, no, but I bagged on them for all the wrong reasons. It was they weren't heavy, there weren't guitar solos and blah. I was like they weren't metal, and it was just totally wrong. Just arrogant dick. That was me. I admit it. That's it.
That's the joy of growing older.
Yeah,
you kind of mellow out, let go of those kind of things, and go, hey. I was kind of wrong. Last year I covered the stuff I was completely wrong about.
Mm-hmm.
Like Jonathan Richman, I had just written off as a novelty act.
Okay.
And I went back and listened to the early albums, and I was like, I'm an idiot. These were really amazing, and they're pretty much got the same spirit as a lot of that stuff I worked on. So, and it's kind of nice to just be able to go, hey, I was wrong.
Yep.
And now I can enjoy this. That gives us new things to explore.
Totally, absolutely. So I want to tap on a couple of things about new music for just a couple of minutes, and then I want to talk about things that you're doing more currently, especially your blog stuff and your participation in the Occupy movement. And so I want to get to that in a second. But just quick thoughts. Today's music scene. Do you listen to it at all? Do you have any thoughts about it? Are there any? Any just complete moments of it's fucked? Are there any things that you hear you go, oh wow, there's hope for something moving in the future?
I don't spend a lot of time listening to new stuff. I don't listen to a lot of rock music anymore.
Mm-hmm. So what do you listen to?
But I listen to a lot of old music. You know, I deal in old records, and I like old classical and old jazz records and old Northern soul and doo-wop and stuff like that. But, you know, the music industry's in a strange state because it can't make money.
Right.
So you've already got that problem. So there's this small amount of music that's this mainstream pop music that's generally pretty awful.
Yep.
To my ears. I try not to be too judgmental, but that kind of music that's obviously made in a computer and fixed up in a computer and no longer has the heart and soul that I like in music. Seems to work on some people. Doesn't work on me.
So I'm going to take...
but, you know, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm going to take a quick Harley, because you had sent me a link, and you've got a track that I happen to think is incredibly cool, and that is Acoustic Guitar with Stove. Just the title in and of itself to me is like, that's so worthy. I don't even know where to go with it. And actually, I really want to play this because I think it's awesome. Just completely vibey and ambient, and you know, it's the kind of thing that I could just totally see sitting in my living room or something, just at the end of the day, just taking a moment to just sit back and breathe and listen to this piece. So,
Cool.
Give me one quick sec while I do the technology end of this. There it is. So we're going to play this, and then we're going to come back and we'll talk about your blog stuff and the Occupy stuff. But this is what I think is, again, incredibly cool. This is Kevin Army with Acoustic Guitar with Stove. And no, this is not a theme song for a cooking class. Well, so there is the breadth of human emotion right there. That is such a beautiful piece, man. Where did that come from?
I have no idea. You know, sometimes about
My
a year
favorite
ago,
place.
I started doing these improvisational guitar things. I don't know, but I enjoy doing them.
So where was the stove in that?
If you watch the video, it's me filming my stove through my sweater. so you see these like little round lights, and it's like all white, and that's the stove.
That's so great. That was
Yeah.
You know, that's I love stuff like that. I mean, and I think the idea that somebody can artistically and musically really span that. You know, 1 minute you're doing punk rock stuff, and then you're as far off as doing that. I think that says a lot about the ability of human and artistic expression to really hit those very wide gaps, and nicely done, man.
Thanks.
So let's talk. I'm sorry?
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, so since I know that it's been a while since that you've done stuff in rock and roll, and you've definitely been blogging a lot frequently, and certainly doing some things of a more political nature, and you actually had sort of a role in some of the Occupy movement stuff that went on recently. So tell me about being involved in you occupied what?
Well, my role was more I because I wrote the blog and they put out an open call on the place I blog at for people to report on that stuff. So I started reporting on it. And so I didn't join up like going to the camping or anything like that. But I guess towards the end you could kind of say I was going to the demonstrations, being in the crowd. And getting behind the general idea of what was happening here.
Sure.
And if I had any role, it was just a self-made role of wanting to tell a truth that I saw that the media was not portraying.
Sure.
Which was frustrating to me because there was so much good stuff going on at the Oakland camp. And, of course, there was such a campaign to make it sound like there wasn't any good stuff so they could get rid of it and they could justify all the things they did to everyone.
Right, and so just for a moment, let's clarify in terms of this Occupy movement, we are talking about Occupy. You were up in Oakland, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so just so nobody's going, he was in Occupy Wall Street? No, Occupy up in Oakland, but it was a nationwide movement, and yes, there was a great deal more activity going on that was certainly than what was being reported on, certainly in the mainstream media, and as soon as you get into what's being reported on the internet, you never know what's real and what's bullshit. So, but you were certainly there, for a piece of it. For you, did you feel like anything, was there an accomplishment that happened as a result of it?
I'm not sure. There was an accomplishment in the moment.
Sure.
Oakland had that period after the first raid that went so badly on the police's end.
Right.
That created all this huge support. So that by the time 2 weeks after that raid, when they had the strike day with the first port shutdown, there were a lot of people who were unhappy and angry who gravitated towards that and had a voice for a day.
Right.
And they were frustrated with how things went. And that was a fascinating part of it for me.
I agree.
And that's a lot of it. It accomplished things right in the moment, just like the camp would feed a lot of homeless people. They were feeding 500 to 1,000 people a day. And then, it did bring to light a larger discussion of all this income disparity that had started to happen by then, and all these crazy things we'd done, like bailing out banks. And it did change a discussion nationally, whether there's still Occupy things going on. They're very small, I think. a lot of people would be unhappy to hear me say that, but
it's true.
It's gone underground, which is punk rock went underground for a long time before it got big. So I don't know. I don't know. It's probably too soon to know exactly what the accomplishment is.
No, no. In fact, I totally agree with you. In fact, I think one of the things that gets lost in just about any movement is that, for the most part, when you're trying to do something to make a difference, I think it's a mistake to somehow believe that it's going to be an instantaneous response, as though you'll show up one day, make a protest, make a statement, and everybody will go, "Oh yeah, you're right," and boom, it'll change. No, it's not the way it works. You know, you throw the pebble into the clear lake, and the ripples take time to hit the edge of that lake. It takes time for these things to happen. And I think that the only time that any sort of movement that actually has validity and any sort of certainty to make some sort of a change is for the people that are behind it to have the faith in it, to stick with it and hang their way through it. Because it ain't going to happen tomorrow, and it's probably not going to be next week, and it's not going to be next year. In fact, it may be on your kid's first birthday. You're going to go, "Hey, you got cake, and by the way, Mom and Dad changed the world."
Yeah, you just don't know how things will go. And it kind of, like the place Occupy is in our society right now, which is kind of like a bad word. And it's very similar to me of what punk rock was in 1985.
Right.
I mean, I remember probably later than that, when I first started getting some breaks, and I remember going to some A&R offices playing demo tapes and having all these A&R people like skip through the punk rock song and laugh at me. And, you know, I'm going to guess about 2 years later they were thinking, "Oh, we kind of blew it, didn't we?" So, you know, and if nothing else, it sowed the seeds of a bunch of people. I came out of it way more radicalized. I used to be the kind of person, when I'd hear people talking about, "Oh, the government's flooding us," I'd go, "Oh, you're an idiot." And, you know, I things come out of my mouth now that I would have thought I was a kook for saying 5 years ago. So, you know, your perspective on the world does change when you stood on the main street of your city and watched a tank come down that street. You know, it's very strange, and my perspective on our country's a little skewed because of that.
When your hometown turns into Red Dawn, and yet nobody else has flown in to invade you, that gets a little weird, right?
Yeah, I mean, we had that horrible, you know, night where they were just, you know, people. I mean, and the world saw the pictures of it looking like they were bombing the streets with the tear gas and the flash grenades, and, you know, it was crazy. It's crazy to watch, but it was also exciting to be around.
I would think. I mean, there's got to be, you know, there's an element that when you're doing something like that, when you're really standing up for something that you wholeheartedly believe in and you feel to be honest and true, and you're doing that for all the right reasons, there's also got to be the adrenaline rush that when you know the fight that's going to happen shows up, there's part of you that has to say, "Yeah, now I'm in it for the right reasons." And because that sort of blowback is coming at you, you almost realize, "Oh yeah, no, I am here for the right reason. But oh shit, it's fucking dangerous."
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, because at the first raid, I had my run-in with the police where I shouldn't have been so close to them, and I got thrown on the ground.
Ouch.
But that kind of gave me this sense of purpose that I was going to always be there with a camera.
Right.
So if they did anything, I understood the importance of as many people as possible with cameras reporting on things, which I didn't ever capture anything that would have been damaging evidence. But I was just reading about one guy who settled a lawsuit with the city because someone did capture him getting beaten for no good reason on video.
This is exactly how these things start. It's like it's little bits and pieces that you begin to chip away at here's the bullshit, and you talk about it, and you point it out, and little bits and moments begin to show up. And over the course of time, they build into a case that becomes incontrovertible. And that's how a movement becomes a movement. It goes beyond. I mean, I always felt that Occupy was like, I always felt that like that was a bad title. Because Occupy would only work if there was nobody there to begin with. But it's like, well, there's already people there, so you can't occupy it. They're already there. Hostage situation might have been more... would have rang a few more bells. Also might have brought up police in a larger realm, and that would have been weird.
Yeah, but, maybe even more, yeah. Maybe sooner.
Yeah, but...
I don't think... the people who started everything, I don't think they ever really imagined what they were doing, like what was going to happen.
But I think that the best movements and the best things always come that way. Out of innocence is what always grows the greatest stuff. I didn't know what I was doing when I started this band, and boom, it happened. I didn't know what I was starting with this political movement, and boom, it happened. I didn't know what I was doing when I slept with that blonde, and boom, I've got this great kid. Who knows? It's just the way those things go.
Yeah.
So
they just live life.
So we are down to about a minute and a half left, and so I want to absolutely thank you so much for taking your time to call in and be a part of the show and a part of this narrative. And God, we didn't even get into the Castle Black stuff. All right, we got. Yeah. I need 20 seconds. Your best Castle Black first record memory. Go. That was fair.
It's all fuzzy. But, that's how I started engineering, was I was producing a demo tape by him, and Matt Wallace, who was engineering it, I hounded him to get a job. That's how I met him.
In fact, so as we close out the show, I'll tell you that you were actually there on my first session in a legitimate real recording studio. I believe it was Dangerous Rhythm in wherever the fuck that was in Richmond. And the record was already done, and we were trying to do the intro to 10 High. It was the fake live thing, and we needed somebody to do an intro. And you were there when I recorded Montreal. Would you please welcome from San Francisco, Castle Black? Yeah, so that is how you and I met, and we are down to about 10 seconds. So Kevin Army, this radio show is about to rudely cut you off because that's the way our program works, but I'll call you in a bit. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I really, really appreciate your time. So yeah, man, really awesome. I hope to talk to you and see you soon, brother.
Okay, thanks.
And everybody out, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of American Psycho with all of its fun and wacko and weirdness. And we will see you next week. And who knows what the fuck is going to happen then? I don't, because I gave up trying to figure that shit out weeks ago. Thank you again. Take care.
Brian, I think you've said enough this week. Join us every Friday at 8 for more from the American Psycho. Stay tuned for Liquor and Poker coming up next on X-Psych Radio.